So be it, Jedi.
What's going on, guys? Back in another video, another episode of Read It or Skip It, and today we're on book 2 of the Republic Commando series by Karen Travis. This book is titled 000. So as always, we'll talk about the main plot and then later on delve into some more specifics and some spoilers. But first I want to say, if you haven't seen my review of Hard Contact, the first book in this series, definitely recommend you do so, or you're really not going to have an idea as to what's going on. So this book takes place on Coruscant, or as they call it, 000. We still have our main characters from the first novel, that being Omega Squad, which is Niner, Atten, Darman, and Phi. We still have our Jedi Padawan, Etain Tamerkin. Barden Jussic, who was a Padawan in the first novel, is a big part in this story as well. But the most notable addition is Delta Squad. That's right, the squad from the Republic Commando games. We have Boss, Sev, Fixer, and Scorch. Something I glossed over in the first review of the first book is they talk about the guy that trained them, and his name was Cal Scarata. He was a Mandalorian mercenary hired by the Kaminoans and Jango Fett to train Republic Commandos. And they always talk about him with very high regard and think about things that he would have said or would have wanted them to do, etc. Doesn't delve a whole lot into it in the first book, but in this one, he's actually in it. He plays a super big part, and honestly, he was one of my favorite characters. Another interesting character that is an addition is the Mandalorian mercenary Wayland Val. Now, out of all of Omega Squad, only Atten was trained by Val. And he's kind of portrayed as like this psychopath that really was just like kind of abusive to his clones that he trained. So you can tell Atten's kind of messed up by it. One of my favorite introductions to this story is the inclusion of Null ARC Troopers. What Null ARC Troopers are ARC Troopers that pretty much were like the first batch to be bred, and they are so deficient in all the things that normal clones have. They don't listen. They're pretty much crazy. And one of the main characters, Ordo, not Fordo, from the Clone Wars animated series, Captain Ordo is a Null ARC Trooper, and he's just a badass. I mean, in one scene, he like punches this other ARC Trooper in the face, and like the Nulls pretty much do not listen to anyone aside from Cal Scarata. He sort of treats them as his own sons, and later in the video, I'll delve into some more specifics about that. So as I mentioned, the story takes place on Coruscant, and pretty much what our gang of characters is trying to do is uncover this terrorist plot that is going on. There's been bombings and attacks on Republic military bases, and they're trying to figure out who's at the bottom of it. For the most part, honestly though, that plot really is like secondary to like our character plot. This story is very different from the first one in terms of there's a lot more characters. It's a very character-driven story. And as I said, the whole terrorist plot, by the end, you kind of feel like it's really underwhelming. And you feel as though, is that really what the story was about? Because ultimately it's not. The story is about the characters, their character growth, their development, their trials and what they're dealing with, etc. So as I mentioned, the clones in Hard Contact speak very highly of Cal Scarata. We are introduced to Cal 8 years before the Clone Wars start on Kamino, where he first witnesses 2-year-old ARC Troopers, the Nulls. And essentially the Kaminoans want to kill them because they're defective. So he steps in between them and says, you're not going to touch these kids, blah, 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 blah. And that's when he puts them up under his wing and pretty much adopts them as his own kids. So as I said, he's a very complex character in terms of you have this hard, badass Mandalorian that's like, you know, typical Mandalorian. Then on the other side, you have this caring and loving father that really does care about these clones and all these clones. And that's pretty much what drives him, is doing what he can for his boys, as he calls it, and trying to just see that they're taken care of. We see a lot of back and forth between Omega Squad and Delta Squad, as they were both raised by two different Mandalorians. Wayland Val trained Delta Squad, and Cal Scarata trained Omega Squad. They do things differently. Cal was very loving, while Wayland Val was kind of a sociopathic piece of shit. I mean, he trained them to be the best, but they don't really have that association with him as a loving father. When I mentioned in the first book that there was this weird scene or this weird chemistry between Darman and Etain, well, this book pretty much blows it out of the water. So they end up falling in love, and honestly, like, I'm gonna get to it in a minute, but I did not like this book as much as I liked the first one. I liked some aspects. I liked Ordo, I liked Cal Scarata, I liked all the involvement with the Commandos, you know, Delta and Omega Squad. But to be honest, dude, Ethane sucks. She like sucked this story like a black hole. Her and Darwin end up falling in love and getting together. They end up hooking up, and guess what? She decided it'd be a good idea to give him a baby. You know, if you ever encounter a woman like that, just run, because that's just crazy. That's like next level crazy shit. Anyway, she ends up feeling that she's pregnant in the Force, and of course, she wants to keep it a secret. Darman, at this point, still doesn't know, so she ends up telling Cal, and Cal's pissed, and pretty much what ends up happening to Etain is she gets sent off back to Kalura, the planet from the first story, and that's where she's going to stay and raise the baby, and eventually they'll tell Darman, because if you tell Darman, hey, your girlfriend that you really shouldn't have as a clone trooper is pregnant, so that would totally like mess his head up in, you know, battle and stuff like that. I like the idea of clone, you know, and a Jedi relationship, but this book just goes like 0 to 100, and it does not feel nuanced. It's like worse than Anakin and Padme's relationship in like the prequels. It's just so stupid, and it took all I had not to be like taken out of it because of that. It was just so jarring, and like, I've talked enough about it. As I said, they uncover the separatist plot that, you know, they end up doing some stuff and selling some people some bombs, and that's how they figure out who it is. But like I said, the whole terrorist subplot is just not the climax of the story. It's like I said, it's an excuse to get the characters involved with one another. But other than that, it's just like that's it, because that shit wraps up like with like 100 pages left of the book. All in all, it wasn't a terrible story. I've read much worse. It was definitely a downgrade from the first novel, as the first one was just so centralized and small and took place on one planet and only had a few characters to deal with. And those stories are generally more structurally sound than big stories with, you know, a dozen plus characters that you're interacting with. As I said, I like some elements. I like Ordo, the No Arc Trooper. I liked Cal Scarata, but the whole terrorist subplot was nothing, a nothing burger. And Etain really just like sucked the life out of me. So that being said, I'm currently reading the third novel, True Colors, and I'm over halfway through, and that book is exceptionally better than this one. Probably the best one of the three. Can't wait to review that one. Have a lot of positive things to say about that. This one, not so much. As I said, if you read the first one, read this. Don't just skip it. It's not terrible. I've read worse, but it's not as good as the first. That being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know only a few of you watch these, and if you do, I really appreciate it. So if you watch the previous video on Hard Contact, you watch this one, and hey, you hang around long enough to watch me review the entire series, that would mean a lot to me. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I see you on the next one.